When I was in high school, I worked as a barista for 3.5 years at a small local coffee shop. Like this guy. Well, I had a beard. No, that's not. Okay. Towards the end of my tenure, we got a new employee. We'll call him, I don't know, Sony. As had been my responsibility with new employees for a couple years, I trained him in the subtle art of uh, uh, making lattes. Now, I've had a lot of jobs in my life. I've worked as a valet, a caddy, a dishwasher, an assembly worker, a camp counselor, a dog walker. I took internships in operations, product management, and programming, and now I'm an electrical engineer. And I can honestly say that being a barista is one of the easiest jobs known to man. So don't tip the douchebag who pours you coffee. But despite the ease of being a barista, Sony was utterly incompetent at it. So incompetent that I no longer have fingerprints on my right hand because of him. And to answer your question, no, coffee doesn't get hot enough to burn your fingerprints off, as far as I know. It was even worse than that, but that's a story for another time.
A good question for another time.
He was so bad at being a barista that it was legitimately impressive. In the same way that Madam Web is so bad at being a movie that it's legitimately impressive.
Wow! Nice segue.
Look, I'm gonna spoil this entire movie. But if you're saying, Sauce, no, I still want to see it, don't worry. You can watch it after I explain it, and it will still make as much sense as it did for the rest of us who suffered through it raw. The film opens with a very pregnant Constance Webb in the jungles of Peru searching for a spider with the villain of the story, Ezekiel.
Ezekiel? That thing fucking sucks!
They share some extremely clunky expository dialogue about the incredible capacities of this spider's venom, with such brilliant lines as, yeah, the mythical spider people who run across the treetops and punish evil men with their black poison pests. I'd like to make my research on science, not legends, Mr. Sims. And these little spiders have the potential to cure hundreds of diseases. Upon finding one, Ezekiel takes pictures of Constance's notes, shoots two of the other scientists with them, takes the spider from Constance, and accidentally shoots her in the process. Why doesn't Ezekiel just find another spider? I don't know. Why does he shoot 3 people, including a pregnant woman, instead of just stealing the spider under cover of night? I don't know. Why did none of the other people shown in the background of this scene hear the gunshots and come investigate? I don't know. Did none of those other expeditionists piece together what happened and report Ezekiel to the police when they returned to the States? I don't know. But some spider people come and get Constance and bring her to a magical cave where they let a spider bite her and assist her in giving birth to her daughter Cassie. Then, head honcho, who we'll call Aragog for this video, assures Constance that he will answer her daughter's questions when the time comes. So she gets powers from a spider biting her mom minutes before she's born. Guess we're doing a Last of Us thing here. Also, none of the spider people track Ezekiel down for some reason. Feels like they wouldn't want to let their secret power source fall into the hands of a murderer, but whatever. Cassie finds her way back to America. I assume the spider people just dropped her off at the scientist camp. Fast forward 30 years, and Cassie is working as an EMT with her partner, Ben Parker.
No way!
Cassie has some dialogue while driving a patient to the hospital, like, she's not going room temp on my watch because she's such a girl boss. While still at the hospital, they run into the woman's family, and her young son wants to thank Cassie by giving her a picture he drew of his family. And Cassie, tries to refuse to take it? Because you know how when you save a woman's life, you act like a heartless wench to her son?
Then where'll you be, huh? You heartless wench!
I mean, I remember when I broke my leg on Thanksgiving as a kid, when my mom offered the paramedics who took me to the hospital our pumpkin pie, they threw it in my older brother's face, of course.
One custard pie? Let me have it!
Cassie goes back to her apartment and feeds a stray cat that she's befriended, so you can mark lonely single cat lady in her 30s on your bingo card. Later, Cassie and Ben are saving a man from a car that is teetering over the edge of a bridge without making any attempt to stabilize or move the car, which seems like it would be prudent. Then, somehow, against all odds, Cassie gets trapped in the car as it falls into the water below. But rather than killing Cassie, this activates her powers to glimpse into the future. Why is this what activates her powers? I don't know. Over the coming days, though, Cassie begins to experience her powers, and learns that not only can she see the future, but she actually has the power to alter the future to be different than what she sees. But I guess I should reintroduce you to the villain, Ezekiel. He apparently has a recurring vision in his sleep of 3 Spider-Woman heroes killing him in the future. Ooh. I'm sure the 7 people who know who these heroes are and care about them can't wait to see them in action later in this movie. Why are they going to kill him? I don't know. But he has bedded a woman from the opera who evidently works for the NSA, and he poisons her, steals something from her, like a flash drive or something, and forces her to give him a password to something. I don't know if it's a password to a facility or a password for software or what, but soon he has his sidekick set up at a desk with access to the NSA's facial recognition technology. Now, this is why I say I don't know what exactly he stole from her. You would assume he needed access into the NSA's software, but the setup he has his henchwoman at looks like something possible in 2024, but this is in 2003. And this is what computer technology looked like then. So maybe he did use the info he got from her to sneak into an NSA facility and steal a dozen monitors and computers that were really ahead of their time. He probably wore a fake mustache and posed as a maintenance worker. And of course, I haven't even mentioned that the person from the NSA responsible for keeping this extremely sensitive information safe had it on her person as she went to the opera and then back to a stranger's apartment for a one-night stand. And the NSA didn't revoke the clearance connected to her password or trace it to its place of use after they figured out she was missing or dead. Actually, that's exactly the level of competence I expect from the government. Also, who is this woman Ezekiel has working for him? I don't know. Why is she helping him? I don't know. But she's really, really good. She recreates the faces of the women from Ezekiel's vision, in which the faces, of course, are mostly obscured by masks. And Ezekiel has gray hair, so this is far into the future. But those limitations that would stymie us mere mortals are no match for What's-Her-Face. She's able to get matches for their girls. And not like, oh, here are 12 possible people to match each of the women from your visions. No, she gets the exact 3 girls Ezekiel is looking for. Now I hear you say, whoa, 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 Sauce, slow down. Aren't you going to tell us who this villain is? What his motives are? How he's amassed such clear wealth to live in this expensive home? How he's used his powers since he got them? I'd love to, but I don't know the answer to those questions any more than you do. None of them are even acknowledged in this film. He talks about the girls threatening what he's built, but for all the movie shows us, he might just be talking about his Lego Death Star. All I know about Ezekiel is
he was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Which, by the way, makes things really confusing because apparently in the comics, Ezekiel Sims is actually a good guy. So if you're a fan of the comics, you can't even superimpose the character from the comics onto him in this movie. But I will say, in the interest of gender equality, it was very brave to make the dull, motiveless, nonsensical villain a man for a change. Now, Cassie takes a seat on the subway and starts having a vision in multiple pieces. In her vision fragments, she sees the 3 girls Ezekiel is hunting down get killed by Ezekiel on the train. Wow, how lucky for Ezekiel that as soon as he figures out who he needs to kill, they all converge at the same point, despite their lives not actually being connected. Oh, sorry, I forgot the girl from the porn book is the key to everything. Speaking of which, meaning Cassie, not porn books, I guess I should take some time to tell you about how Cassie's powers work. So, after she's done having her visions, Oh, no, I didn't cut anything out. I gave you exactly as much explanation for Cassie's powers as the film gives us. I've kind of given up on hoping to see heroes have to go through training to learn how to use their abilities, particularly if they have a certain pairing of chromosomes. But this actually might be worse than Ray and Captain Marvel. Not only has Cassie not spent time practicing looking into the future, when it happens, she never manages to do it on purpose. It's like the spider venom that got into her through the placenta after biting her mom or whatever is sending her visions of its own accord. And the venom knows exactly what visions will be useful to the plot. Anyway, after Cassie's done having her visions, she sees the 3 girls come onto the subway and sees Ezekiel in the car in front of theirs coming towards them. So she grabs the girls and takes them off the subway, trying to get away from Ezekiel. Sydney Sweeney's character, yeah, I didn't bother to remember her name, she's just Sydney Sweeney, calls out, "This woman is trying to abduct us," which honestly seems reasonable, yeah. But then all 4 girls look and see Ezekiel, now in his spider outfit, crawling across the ceiling. So they bounce onto another subway train and then back off, again trying to get away from the creepy guy trying to kill them. And they start heading towards the exit, with no fewer than 6 cops in their path. The cops stop them and begin to arrest Cassie, because of course, Sydney Sweeney just announced she was kidnapping them, but Cassie says, "You don't understand, we're being attacked. And then, Ezekiel attacks. And it begins a pattern in every action scene involving Ezekiel. He attacks everyone except for the 3 people he needs to kill. He takes down the cops from the shadows, but the 4 girls get away in a stolen taxi. Now obviously, they're freaking out about seeing a guy crawling on the ceiling, and wondering how that's even possible, but one of the girls interjects, "It's not." There's not enough friction or force in the bare human foot to overcome gravity and keep him stuck to the wall, even more to the ceiling. Cassie wants to drop the kids off with their parents, but for various reasons, that's not possible for them. On the radio, they hear the police report of the incident, which only mentions a woman as a suspect. Okay, even though Ezekiel clearly took down the cops, he even did it face to face with one of them. That doesn't make much sense, but don't worry, it'll make even less sense later. So because the girls have nowhere safe to stay, Cassie drives them to the woods. You know, rather than taking them to a police station and letting them corroborate her story, or even just dropping them off at a station. She could still run off if she wanted to and let the girls sort it out somewhere safe. But nah, she takes them into the woods. Now, ironically, the woods are kind of the safest place for them to be, at least as far as avoiding Ezekiel goes. There are no cameras in the woods, except for the birds, so he won't be able to pick them up with his facial recognition software. But I don't understand how Cassie knows this. How does she know that Ezekiel is hunting them using facial recognition? Even if Cassie knew all about facial recognition, wouldn't she first conclude that Ezekiel had just seen one of the girls on the street and followed her down into the subway? And she really shouldn't know about the capacity of facial recognition. This is 2003. Sure, facial recog has been around for over 50 years, but it wasn't used by the NYPD, the agency Cassie would know the most about, until 2011. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt didn't drop the dime on the NSA until 2013. I guess Cassie's magical spider powers showed her that too. So the girls get to talking in the woods, and they realize they've all crossed paths with Cassie before. Wow, her web really does connect them all. She tells them she can see into the future, and we get the joke from No Way Home, except that movie was kinda good.
Oh, what the hell? She didn't see that coming?
Superhero thing. Why'd you do that?
I was trying to see if you have the tingle thing.
I have the tingle thing, just not for bread.
Then Cassie leaves the girls in the woods so she can go home and dig up her mom's old research on spiders because I guess she remembers reading about the spider people in her mom's notes. Even though her mom didn't care about the people with supernatural powers, she just wanted to cure diseases. We then get another hilarious scene of Cassie trying to crawl up a wall and sliding right back down. Back in the woods, the girls decide to ignore Cassie's instructions, which, fair, and go to a diner they saw up the road. While there, a man at the counter recognizes the three girls and calls the cops. Now you may say, wow, that police report over the radio must have given really clear descriptions of the girls. And crazy that he assumed these were the girls that got abducted, seeing as how they are clearly walking around freely and are not with the woman who's suspected of abducting them. Well, it's actually not insane, because you see, that gentleman is reading a newspaper that has photographs of the girls caught by security cameras. Hold up. This all happened today. They've printed a new paper since this happened? And it's the front page story? But there's more. I'm assuming that because it says CCTV footage at Grand Central Terminal, they must have at least one security camera in the station where the attack occurred. And they still don't know there was a creepy ceiling crawler attacking them? How have they not pieced together that this is more than just Dakota Johnson kidnapping three girls? Well, when that gentleman with the magic newspaper calls the police, Ezekiel's henchwoman is able to listen in on that call and get their location. Fine. So later, Ezekiel shows up, but the police strangely don't. Which is weird because you would assume there was at least one cop who was much closer to the diner at the time that call was made than Ezekiel was, seeing as how he's in New York and the girls are in New Jersey. Well, when henchwoman tells Ezekiel where the girls are, he then patches into Churchill Police Radio with his own officer ID and informs dispatch that, no, in fact, these are not the missing girls. Now, I think this little scene might not raise any red flags if your brain has already turned to mush. You may just say, oh, thank God they provided some explanation for how we found them. But it's really a strange sequence. Ezekiel uses an officer ID 223. Now, henchwoman doesn't give Ezekiel this ID, so pretty lucky he picks three numbers that actually constitute a police ID for this department, especially considering police IDs usually include at least one letter. They must not use letters though, because if there was no 223, surely dispatch would be aware of that, or have some way to check, so maybe he's using an officer's ID who's off duty today. But still, we have to rely on them not knowing that. We also have to rely on dispatch not having any way to see where the officers are, or at least where their squad cars are. Otherwise, she could see on a map who's close to the diner. But the reason this scene immediately triggered some alarm bells in my head is what Ezekiel tells dispatch to keep officers away from the area. He says, no need to send backup, These aren't our missing persons. Repeat, these are not our missing persons. What a strange thing to say, and it should make no sense to dispatch. He doesn't say, I'm in the area, I can look into it. He just straight up declares, nope, these are 3 random girls, which makes it sound to dispatch like he's already at the diner or something. The scene cuts back to the diner as soon as he says these aren't our missing persons, and I'll tell you why. Because if they had let that dialogue with dispatch run its course, it would have gone like this. 223, what do you mean they aren't our missing persons? How do you know that? Oh, well, I was just at that diner. Well, then why did someone call 911 instead of just talking to you? Also, why were you at that diner? Your beat's not in that area. Well, I stopped in for a donut and coffee. Trust me, we don't need any backup there. It kind of seems like you just really don't want any of our officers to go to that diner. Also, 223 isn't a legitimate call sign. You need a letter. All available officers, please report to the diner on Route 206. So, back to the plot. Cassie comes back to the woods to find the girls missing, and her plot powers kick in. They show her a vision of her tracking them through the woods to the diner to find the girls dancing on the table to Toxic by Britney Spears. Not sure how Cassie learned to track like that, but alright. She then scolds them for being reckless when Ezekiel shows up, dismantles Cassie, and starts killing the girls. With the knowledge of this future in mind, Cassie opts not to go through the woods, but rather take the stolen taxi. And she leaves as Toxic is starting to play on the radio. She tries to speed her way there, but gets stuck behind a logging truck, even though she clearly has opportunities to pass it. Kind of like all the opportunities everyone in Kenobi has to grab Leia, but they don't really want to for dramatic purposes. Before Cassie gets there, Ezekiel shows up in his spider suit. As he slowly enters the diner, Cassie rams through the windows of the building, running him over, and tells the girls to get in. What doesn't make sense is that in Cassie's vision where she walked to the diner, she gets there before Ezekiel. But in the reality where she drives to the diner, Ezekiel gets there before her. I guess she was behind the logging truck, but it's not like the truck was going 5 miles an hour. How did it take longer to drive there than walk? Maddie said she saw it from the road a half-mile back. This scene was taking notes from Rose in The Last Jedi. Cassie tells the girls she's going to dump them off with their parents, but now we learn that all 3 of their parents are really out of the picture. Sydney Sweeney's mom is in a psych ward and she ran away from her dad's new family. Maddie's parents apparently resent her and won't fly back from China for this, which seems a little self-pitying and presumptuous. Like that conversation will go, hey mom, dad, so me and 2 other girls have been attacked twice today by a creepy man in a black costume trying really hard to kill us. Oh good, hopefully the 3rd time's the charm. And Anya's mom is dead, and her dad was just deported because he's an illegal immigrant. She says, I can't go to the police. I can't exist. Really pretty funny that the writers think this is a sob story the audience will resonate with in the United States in 2024. Ironically, though, the girls just highlighted exactly what Cassie should do with each of them. Let Anya get deported to Mexico or wherever her dad ended up. Send Maddie to her parents in China. Just get on the phone with them and tell them you're an EMT and what the situation is. And put Sydney Sweeney in protective custody. Boom, bang, bop. The girls are spread out around the world, and it's a whole lot harder for Ezekiel to get to any one of them, much less all 3. Instead, however, Cassie takes them to stay with Ben Parker while she goes to Peru to learn more about the spider people mentioned in her mom's notes. Wow, sure, drop the 3 girls being targeted by a homicidal madman with your friend who is also going to be with his 8 months pregnant sister-in-law. But before that, she teaches the girls how to perform CPR. A very strange thing to teach them rather than, some form of basic self-defense. I wonder if that'll have a payoff later. So Cassie makes her way down to Peru. I assume the authorities haven't connected her to the quote-unquote kidnapping of the girls, or she would have been arrested at the airport. I mean, American airport security wasn't exactly known for being laid back in the 2000s, if you can believe it. So she journeys into the Amazon rainforest and walks directly to the area where Las Arañas found her mom. You'd think she might need a guide, or it would take a lot of searching to find a secret tribe of people who run across treetops. But that's because your web is lame. Hers is special. Aragog from 30 years ago brings her to the cave and he looks exactly the same, so I guess one of the spider's powers it grants is anti-aging cream. He then shows Cassie visions of the past, specifically of her mom, Constance, and Cassie is reacting. At one point, while in the jungle just before Cassie is born, Constance feels Cassie kicking or something and says, she really is trying her best to keep me from working. I'm not going to let her do that. And Cassie says, why did you hate me so much? Which seems like a pretty irrational response. I don't have a bigger point to make about this line. It's just dumb. Eventually, the flashback goes back further, to Constance in a doctor's office hearing test results about her baby. Apparently, Cassie had a rare neuromuscular disorder in utero, and her mom knew right off the bat there was a potential cure buried somewhere deep in the Amazon, so she went down to Peru and started searching. And Cassie says, "That's why you went there? For me? You did it. You did it. I never knew I was sick. The spider venom did have healing properties. I'm so sorry I spent so long being mad at you." First of all, thank you, writers, for spelling that out for me like the mentally challenged orangutan that I clearly am. Second of all, why were you mad at your mom? The movie doesn't give us much indication up to this point that Cassie seriously resents her mother. And why would she? Because she died? In Peru? While researching spiders? For real, why would Cassie have any reason for being angry with her mom? But she is. Aragog then tells Cassie about her powers, telling her, "You didn't get the gift of greater physical strength or the ability to release poison, but seeing into the future is only the start. Your mind has infinite potential. If you master your power, you can use the web to be in more than one place at the same time. You are the only one who can change the future, and when you take on the responsibility, great power will come." Ah, yes. With great responsibility comes great power. Not as catchy as the original advice from Uncle Ben, or half as coherent, but whatever. Aragog says she can use the web, which makes it sound like it's the Force or something, but no shot we'll get any more on that. She didn't get the same powers that Ezekiel got. I guess when the spider bites you, it spins a wheel to see what powers to bestow upon you, which I guess is okay. Instead, she can use her powers to be in multiple places at once. How? Well, by doing it, of course. If you've made it this far into this video and you're still asking for logic, reason, or causality, you are naive, my friend. Back in America, the three girls have just been chilling at Ben's house for the past week, which means they've had significantly more time to bond with Ben than with Cassie, but naturally they show no affection for the dude that's been taking care of them the past week. They get excited when they see the woman who left them in the woods for 3 hours then ran off to Peru after teaching them CPR. Also, throughout this whole time, they still never say screw it and go to the police. Ben's sister-in-law goes into labor while with them, so Ben has to take her to the hospital. And for some reason, he doesn't think he can leave the girls at the house? They have to come with them? No, they just need to stay out of sight of cameras, which he clearly knows because he has the girls put on hoods to try and help cover their identities. Does that mean that Ben hasn't left the house in the last week because he thinks he needs to be with the girls 24/7? Pretty sure DoorDash wasn't around in 2003. As they're on their way to the hospital, Cassie returns and realizes they're gone, but her plot powers activate and show her where they are. So, does she hail a cab? Does she steal someone's car, which wouldn't be super great, but it's a fairly common trope we get in action movies when the hero is against a clock? Does she do either of those things? Nope. She, and I swear I'm not making this up, steals an ambulance that has just pulled up to the house next door to drive after them. So not like an ambulance that the EMTs just took for a spin and left while they went to walk to a diner and get something to eat and dance on a table to Britney Spears. This ambulance pulls up to the house with its lights on, and the EMTs get out and rush into the house. So Cassie steals an ambulance that was going to be used to immediately transport someone who likely needed life-saving care to a hospital. Your hero, ladies and gentlemen. Ezekiel tracks down the car after Maddie's face is caught by a camera, and henchwoman turns all the traffic lights to green at an intersection to cause a pileup, and Ezekiel closes in on the car. Weird, Edward Snowden never mentioned that the NSA's facial recognition software also gave unfettered access to traffic systems. Also weird, all the people who would have been in the cars that had to stop in the intersection disappear, when they should be out yelling at one another like true New Yorkers. And then something happens. Now look, I think I'm fairly good at finding the words to describe things, even when they're utter nonsense like this entire movie. But what happens next really is a stretch for me. So, Ezekiel is standing on Ben's car looking as menacing as he can when the eye holes in his mask are literal holes. Cassie is driving the ambulance through what I guess is a parking garage with no cars in it in New York City. Sure. And she drives it through a concrete wall that's also the back of a Calvin Klein billboard screen. The ambulance flies through the air and hits Ezekiel. Just Ezekiel, not Ben's car. So, first of all, no. And second of all, no. No way she was able to get the ambulance's speed up enough in a parking garage to break through a concrete wall, much less maintain enough speed to get significant airtime. Also, the ambulance isn't even damaged. And remember when Aragog told her you didn't get the gift of greater physical strength? Well, apparently she did get insane durability, because she does this without a scratch. This is like Black Widow all over again. I mean, the airbags don't even go off.
Oh, I really thought the airbags were gonna go off.
But now I hear you say, "Oh, Sauce, you proponent of pragmatic principles and professionally produced presentations. Stop being an engineer and worrying about how the physics work in a superhero movie." No. But fine, here's a non-physics related point. How on earth was she able to pull this off? Even if the wall was actually just made of paper. Supposedly her clairvoyance showed her where Ezekiel would be, but this is an insane feat. Especially considering she managed to hit only Ezekiel. Well, she already saw it happen. But she still had to manage to do it. If I saw a future in which I held a rifle between my butt cheeks pointing behind me and brought my leg back to pull the trigger with my toe and shoot a Stanley Cup out of a sorority girl's hand, while also juggling 7 rattlesnakes and whistling Freebird by Lynyrd Skynyrd, I'd still have to then manage to do that in the future. And obviously I wouldn't be able to, because I'm scared of snakes. So the girls get in the ambulance because Cassie has a plan. She's going to drive to a fireworks factory and blow it all up in ways that perfectly hit Ezekiel because she can see the future, which serves as a catch-all justification for whatever ridiculous nonsense you want to put in your movie. And then she'll do a commercial for Pepsi. But whilst on their way to the factory, they do something else I have to talk about. Ezekiel is chasing them, and he jumps on top of the ambulance. Inside the ambulance, though, the girls have charged up an AED, or defibrillator, and they place it on the ceiling of the ambulance at the exact same time Ezekiel lands on top of the ambulance, shocking him and causing him to lose his balance before being thrown off the ambulance into a car. Now, when I saw this scene in the theater, I got very excited, because, as I mentioned earlier, I am an electrical engineer. So I know a bit about what was just excreted onto the screen. This is not how electricity works. If you were to actually stick a defibrillator against the roof of an ambulance, assuming, of course, that the roof isn't insulated and is just straight aluminum, which I would kind of assume it would be insulated to help protect the electrical equipment inside of it, but assuming it isn't, all that would happen is that the roof might get hot. The defibrillator would short against the roof and no current would pass through the person on top of it. It would just heat the roof, but with how short an AED shock is, Ezekiel probably wouldn't even feel it. Not to mention it looks like his suit is probably somewhat insulated. So there you go, you learned something today. Now, the final fight. In the fireworks factory. Like I said, they light the fireworks and they all start going off, and they can avoid all of them because Cassie can see the plot, but Ezekiel takes some 4th of July rockets to the chest. Note here, Cassie now apparently has total control over her abilities so that she can see whatever she wants in the future and even plan explosions based around it. Because she practiced really hard to master her power? No. Because the spider people explained to her how to control it and it's just really intuitive? No. Because the dude who wrote Morbius and Gods of Egypt maybe isn't the best writer? What? No, get him another $100 million project. They end up on the roof awaiting a police helicopter Cassie called for without giving any sort of identifier to show she had the authority to do so. Long story short, the building starts getting destroyed underneath them and the helicopter gets disabled because Ezekiel punches a firework that was launched at him and redirects its course to get a bullseye on the chopper. Yup. So the girls, well, really Cassie, is going to have to fight Ezekiel. But she'll have help from the cool, refreshing taste of Pepsi, and not to mention the multitude of other tasty drinks and snacks PepsiCo has to offer. Yeah, this battle takes place on a giant Pepsi sign. Why did Pepsi put their sign on a fireworks warehouse? Like, it's not a billboard, it's the kind of sign you'd put on one of your own buildings. I guess they still had some ammunition left over from their once great naval fleet. Oh, before we get to the little fight Cassie has with Ezekiel, there's a point where the 3 girls, yeah, they're still here, are all hanging precariously from beams and whatnot above a fall that would certainly kill them. And then Cassie remembers what Aragog said about how when you take on responsibility, great plot devices will come, or whatever. So Cassie's responsibility powers activate and she's suddenly in 4 places at once with a weird wispy version of herself helping pull each of the girls to safety. And once again, in this entire time, Ezekiel does not attack any of the girls. The girls that he stole tech from the NSA to hunt down and kill because he has nightly visions of them killing him in the future. But he just doesn't care. He's only interested in Cassie. Then he and Cassie have their fight, away from the girls, of course. Cassie is completely outmatched, and of course it would probably be no help to her at all to have, 4 versions of herself fighting Ezekiel at once. I mean, it's not like she has that power anyway. But she ends up using her divination training from Professor Trelawney to get Ezekiel into a spot where an explosion knocks him to the ground of the warehouse, crumbling beneath them, and the Pepsi P falls directly on him, crushing him. So, he gets hit by a taxi, he's fine. He gets hit by a flying ambulance, he's fine. But he's no match for the crisp taste of Pepsi, which a majority of customers prefer to Coke in a blind taste test. Then Cassie gets thrown into the river next to the warehouse, starts sinking to the bottom Skyfall style, and then gets hit in the face by her firework, which leaves her blind and paralyzed. What? How does that happen? How is the downward angle required to hit her possible? It must have been fired down at the river from the top of the remaining Pepsi sign. You know what? I'm just going to headcanon this one as one of the girls grabbed a firework and pointed it at the river and said, "Oh, this'll be brilliant," and sniped Cassie in the face. The girls somehow pull her out of the water just like Ben did earlier, and they administer CPR to her. Ah, there you are. It's like Chekhov's first aid training. But guess what? They do it wrong. See, not only am I an electrical engineer, but I'm also first aid trained. Technically, wilderness and remote first aid trained. Whatever. I know how to give CPR. I know I sound like a douche right now, but whatever. When you give CPR to a drowning victim, you need to start by giving them 2 rescue breaths, which is the mouth-to-mouth you always see. But Cassie didn't teach them that, so they don't do it. I think the writers just watched The Office as a reference for CPR. Ben's sister has her baby, and if you're wondering why this movie takes place in 2003, this is why. So it can line up with the Spider-Man timeline Sony is still dreaming it can connect to its Venomverse. But I don't think they can say that the baby's name is Peter Parker because Sony doesn't have the legal rights. The movie ends with the girls hanging out with a blind, paralyzed Cassie. And Cassie tells them that she sees them in the future, quote, standing up for what you believe, never giving up, discovering you were always more powerful than you thought. Nothing I didn't already know. And we get a shot of the 4 of them in the future in their respective outfits. And that's it. The movie ends. You don't even get to know how the girls got their powers. Did they have to go to Peru and find the spiders and get bitten? I don't know. Did they find the spider that Ezekiel kept in his apartment? I don't know. Were you hoping for an origin of how the 3 heroes they showed you in the trailers got their powers? Well, get wrecked, nerds. Wow, that was bad. Like watching the Pistons play the Wizards with all the starters on both teams hurt bad. The funny thing is, Ezekiel has a potentially really interesting story to tell in the hands of a competent writer, a man who has recurring visions of his future and is desperate to change it. You could start with Ezekiel trying to change things that would show up in his vision to see if his vision accounts for the changes or if it's just a dream. He could get a tattoo on his hand and see if it's there in the vision. And then his vision starts accounting for him having a tattoo, so he understands he can indeed change the future. So he makes more drastic changes to try and alter it. Maybe he even changes where he lives, but the vision still occurs in the same apartment, so he thinks he's confirmed it's actually just a recurring nightmare. But then he considers, what if that just means that at some point he will end up moving back there, and he starts to lose his mind a bit, trying to figure out truly permanent changes that will stop the visions. You could take it in 2 different directions at the end. He could succeed, and the movie could be about exploring what actions that people take truly have a great impact in our lives and change our futures. Or, kind of what ends up happening in this movie, in his toiling and efforts to alter the future, he actually brings the fate he dreads upon himself even sooner. But instead, we got Madam Web. A movie with frustrating action scenes, a nonsensical plot, hardly any character development outside telling us that some characters' parents are out of the picture for them, conflicting world building in terms of the time it's supposed to take place, a performance from Dakota Johnson that can only be described as bored, and absolutely horrendous ADR. Now, usually when we talk about bad ADR, we're referring to uses of it where the shot changes in a way that it's clear they needed to insert some ADR, such as a weird cutaway from a character giving a monologue to someone else, or a random shot from the back of the person talking. And when you see those, you kind of say, oh, yeah, that's probably ADR. But this movie saw those examples and said, ha, that's child's play compared to what we're going to do. There are moments in this film, particularly with Ezekiel, where they use ADR, but they don't cut to another shot. So you're just left with his voice saying things that aren't even remotely close to the words his mouth is obviously forming, like it's dubbed from another language. Tahar Rahim delivers an incredibly dull villain performance, but to be fair, he was given nothing to work with. Most of the other actors are fine. Again, they just have to play terribly written characters who don't get any interesting dialogue, and they've all unfortunately attached their name to a movie that could only endear itself to people by virtue of how terrible it is. Adam Scott decided to play another character named Ben, and it was Icetown all over again. I will say, both Dakota Johnson and Sydney Sweeney managed to keep their clothes on for the entire project, so that's an accomplishment. But before we go, we have to talk about the marketing for this movie. My goodness. From the actual physical things they decided to put their brand on, to the social media posts they put out, to Dakota Johnson making it so clear she hates this movie on the press tour, that it would make Mark Hamill look like The Last Jedi was his favorite movie ever.
How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end? I read that and I said, what? I mean, that's not what a Jedi does.
It's almost like everyone involved in promoting this movie knew how bad it was and wanted to discourage as many people as possible from seeing it. You likely know the line from the trailer.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Well, somehow it actually all went downhill from there. Let's check out some of the highlights.
Going viral.
Why did that go viral?
I think it went viral because, out of context, people were just like, what does this mean? Did you catch that at all?
No. Somebody brought this up and I have no idea what it's about. Younger women.
Is that an earthquake? Yes. Okay, we just had an earthquake. Did you just do that?
Did I? Do you like that we all just sat here? Fabulous.
That was fabulous.
Can you name the 3 Spider-Man Tom Holland movies?
Yeah.
Should I just go on faith?
Yeah.
Oh.
Spider-Man, here he comes.
Here he comes,
That's number 1.
Yep.
Spider-Man, and he's back. And the other one, the last one is the Goblet of Spider-Man.
So here we have Dakota Johnson showing just how little she cares about this entire movie. In fact, she left her talent agency because of this movie. Now, I don't know much about the role an agent has in determining what projects an actor takes on, and if they can accept a role on behalf of an actor. I would assume it's an agent's role to put opportunities on the table for their clients, help negotiate the best deals possible from a financial point of view, and maybe give some advice on what path forward will likely be the best route for their client. I mean, that's how it works in sports representation. So I wonder if Dakota Johnson's agency assured her this was going to be a big boon to her career, or if she told her agency, get me in a Marvel movie, and they said, all right, you're the lead in Madam Web, which is definitely not the Marvel you meant, lols. Now let's take a look at the posters. Notice anything about all of them? How they use the same picture of Dakota Johnson for every single one of them? And it isn't even a good picture. Again, she just looks bored. Notice how in all the Endgame posters the characters look determined and intense? Not Madam Web. If ever there was a truly expressionless face, this might be it. How about the costume reveals for the characters? Well, for Madam Web, they opted to reveal her look on a bottle of Ocean Spray cranberry juice. But what might be even weirder is, from the looks of it, they pushed this promotion in Asia, not even America.
Okay.
And for the 3 girls, we get these. Ooh, but you don't even get to see the girls in their suits in the movie except for flash forwards. Oh, and don't forget about the weird helicopter they set up that has no connection to the movie whatsoever. Quick note here, Dakota Johnson needs to never do press tours ever again. She is one of the least charismatic Hollywood actors I've ever seen. She's off-putting in a different way to someone like Brie Larson or Rachel Zegler.
I do not need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. Super weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Those two are off-putting for the views they espouse about themselves and the world. Dakota Johnson just always seems bored. And I realize she clearly hated this movie and wanted nothing to do with promoting it, but this is kind of how she's acted for a while now. She's always pretty deadpan and awkward, sort of like Aubrey Plaza, but she doesn't take it as far as Aubrey does, so instead of getting laughs at really quirky moments, you just get the feeling that she's uninterested in whoever's speaking to her and whatever's going on around her.
I actually didn't even know that they were in there. I was giving the tour and went into the kitchen and it was set dressing. I'm allergic to limes.
Oh my, stop it now.
Yeah, I'm mildly allergic.
Now, honestly, all of the marketing stuff is pretty funny, especially when you consider the end result of all of it. Clearly, this movie's a joke, and might honestly become a movie that you turn into a drinking game in college. It won't rise to the level of The Room, because nothing will ever match The Room.
You are lying. I never hit you. You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
But it might get a little mini treatment like that. But to wrap up the abysmal marketing and then the whole video on a slightly more serious note, let's take a look at a couple videos they posted on TikTok and Instagram.
What if you had the power to change it?
Let's try that again.
Why do you care for me?
You don't think this is weird?
It's honestly like the least weird thing that's happened all day.
Now, I assume the target audience of these videos was teenage girls, which just makes me really glad I don't have to work with teenage girls. Teenage boys are bad enough, but PSA, stop trying to make superhero movies that appeal to girls happen. It's not going to happen.
Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
Even for the Marvels, 65% of the audience was male. Guys like superhero movies. I know that's a generalization, but that's what you have to do when trying to figure out what your market is. You can make movies that have women as the target audience, of course. They're just going to be different. Because men and women are different and have different interests. If the movie truly appeals to women, then clearly it doesn't even have to be competently written to smash the box office. But superhero movies, those appeal primarily to men. So stop trying to make them to appeal to women. It's like trying to make dog food to appeal to cats. If you got through that entire video, I assume you either really liked it, you fell asleep somewhere around the barista analogy, or maybe you're just a masochist. If you did really like it, thanks for watching. I do this because I genuinely enjoy it, but having more people along for the ride does make it more fun and encourages me to pour a little more of myself into this. If you think I should do that, there's no better way to show me than to subscribe to the channel. Most of what I do is shorter stuff. Shorter than this, I mean, but I am trying to make longer form content like this a more regular occurrence. And let's just say we've got something big coming later in the year. I hope you'll be along for the ride, and I hope the next time you go to Chipotle, they give you double protein without charging you. Until next time, I don't have a cool sign-off, so here's Plankton.
All right, the sauce.
What?
The sauce. I don't know. You're using too much sauce, okay? Review's over.